One of the things I love most about this work is that even the most seasoned franchise leaders, people who've been doing this their entire careers, still find themselves stuck in the messy middle. And that's what makes this episode so good. Sean Fitzgerald has been in franchising since college. He literally franchised his first business before he had a degree. He's scaled brands, he's turned them around, and today he runs TruBlue Home Service Ally, a company with a crystal clear purpose of helping you age at home. But even Sean, with all of that experience, brought us a question about scale. What happens when your organic growth engine is completely at the mercy of your existing owners? And what you do when that won't move? What TruBlue is doing to kickstart growth instead of just wringing their hands is a masterclass. And honestly, the networking conversation that breaks out in this episode, I was not expecting to go there, but I'm glad it did. Let's get into it. Welcome to Dear Frannie. I'm your host, Katherine LeBlanc.
I'm her co-host, James.
And today we have a very special guest. Sean Fitzgerald is the CEO of TruBlue Home Service Ally. I'm going to let him give a brief background of his experience, but he is an industry veteran, and I'm super excited to talk about the messy middle with him because he's in it right now at the current brand that he runs. So, Sean, tell us a little bit more about you and about TruBlue.
So thanks for having me on. I've been in franchising my entire professional career. I started a business when I was in college and franchised it and have been in franchising ever since. So I really have a passion for growing brands. I love the emerging brands. And so I like to stay in that category, but I've worked for very large brands as well. So I've got a lot of experience with it. And most recently I am president of TruBlue Home Ally, and we are a home maintenance repair company, but we are unique in the fact that we focus on the aging population. So helping people not only age in place, but just help them maintain their home. And this is one of the things coming from one of the stops in my career was in senior care. And so learning the senior care industry, one of the challenges that seniors face today is the home environment itself. And I like to say is like to age in place successfully, it starts with the home. And so the home environment is where seniors are having challenges today. And that's what makes TruBlue such a unique opportunity and a really fun business to be a part of is that, it's a great, huge category industry, seniors, home services, handyman.
Mm-hmm.
But the aspect of bringing it to community where the business with a purpose is really, really cool.
And look, I'm going to jump in as a co-host. A, Sean's a legend. B, fell in love with them like 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And I love when Catherine brings on people much more capable and smarter than I am because it's a low bar, but Sean is a high bar. And so Sean, real quick, man, like give me your sort of franchise structure. Like who's your ideal franchisee? What's that like? Pitch me, right? Like I just wrote down ask for FDD. So like give me the pitch, man, because I'm
Yeah.
interested.
Yeah. So when we're looking for candidates, I think the most important thing for us is that we need people who are sales and marketing minded. You have to have a passion behind this. You got to have empathy, and you got to have to really succeed in building a business with a purpose. You got to have that emotional connection to it. And so for us, it's not about just a business model and business opportunity. It's about having an impact on your community. And so in order to do that, in order to be successful in this space and, whether it's senior care or even our model, which is home services, but focused on the seniors, is that in order to reach the seniors, you have to get to the referral sources. One of the things I learned in senior care was that seniors do not reach out for help. And there's a lot of reasons why, mainly because they don't want to admit that they need help because then they're concerned that they're going to be removed from their home, right? So they resist these types of services when reality they're there to help them stay in their home. So the most important thing is then in order to reach these seniors, you've got to be connected to the senior community, the medical community. And in order to do that, traditional marketing doesn't work. So you have to be networking and connecting. So the type of candidates that we're looking for are people who can tell the story and build teams, because at the end of the day, you got to have teams that are delivering on these higher standards of service. And that's what makes, I think, us a little bit unique is that we approach it from that perspective. And so we have a higher standard to be in senior care. If you're going to go into a senior's home, you have to have high standards. You got to know who these people are, their background checked, they're properly insured. So we applied the same standards to TruBlue. And even though we're home service and repair and maintenance, we have that same standard. So we have this higher standard. Well, that resonates obviously with the medical community. Our franchisees are certified. So they're CAPS certified, which is certified aging in place specialist. So it's more than just a marketing ploy. It's actually, we're educated and we're passionate in it. And so it takes all of that higher standard makes us uniquely different. And that resonates with all homeowners because James, we were talking before, it's like we have daughters and who comes into our home. I'm not necessarily a senior, but who comes in my home is really important to me. And I want to make sure that they have high standards. And so our model resonates obviously with the aging population, but it resonates with the regular community too because of those higher standards. And that's what kind of uniquely position us. And I know it was a long answer
Well,
to a
no, no,
quick
like,
question.
here's my so get tactical for me. What, like, do y'all sell zip codes? Do you sell counties, parishes? Like, what's that look
Yeah,
like?
we're territory modeled, so it's zip codes, and
Sweet.
so we're typically about 175 to 200,000 in total population per territory.
Awesome. And then is that a referral network? If I'm the franchisee, then I am responsible for bringing in or providing the service relative to the home repair?
Yes, so yeah, you're the one that's going to be building the team, and
Yep.
then and of these technicians that then will be deployed to do work in those homes. So
Awesome. And then you guys give me the tools associated to ensure that those people are, safe and qualified and
yeah, we have
capable.
it's part of our standards. Like, yeah,
Yep.
like it's not only the, recruiting process and the tools to do that, but then the background checks and everything else.
And
And
is
then coaching or what's that?
and is that with like independent repair people, or like could I contract with reputable business in the area type of thing, right? Like how does that work relative to the actual service? So for instance, my parents are seniors
Mhm,
and they have one contractor they trust, right?
mhm,
And it's, literally the guy that went to high school like with when my dad was the coach, right?
yeah,
And that's their parameters for trust. I coached him in high school 30, 40 years ago, and now I trust him in my house. But if that contractor stops providing services, like who do I go find as a franchisee of TruBlue to do
yeah.
that?
So you raised 2 good points I wanna address. Number 1 is that relationship that a homeowner like your parents have with that one contractor is really key, and that's why we're TrueBlue, the home ally, because our ultimate goal is to be the ally to a homeowner, especially these seniors. And when done right, they do call us for everything, even if they know we don't do it. And so they say, "Hey, my roof is leaking. Who should I call?" And so that's our ultimate goal is that we're taking this business model and we're approaching it from a relationship versus transactional. And so we want to build a relationship with our customers ongoing. And that way they call us for everything. And that way, if we do it, then great, we can service them. And if we don't, then we can refer
Service them
out.
still. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and then now it's a win-win for us from a business standpoint because if I'm referring out plumbers or roofers, they're going to send business my way.
Amen.
But more importantly, the home
To your
ally.
point of networking. To your
Yeah,
point of networking. Yep.
network is key. And then, but from the consumer perspective, now I'm kind of vetting these contractors for them. And so
Yeah.
this home ally component becomes a bigger piece of it. And it's what homeowners are yearning for, especially the vulnerable like seniors.
All
Mhm.
right. Well, I'm putting my request in for the New Orleans to Baton Rouge area and the Hilton Head to Charleston area. So I'd like
I
first right
love
of
both. I
refusal,
love both
please.
those areas.
Well, Sean, I will to piggyback on some of James' questions. I think there's two things that you brought up around the selection process and the candidate process that and James and I talk a lot about franchise development and how to grow a brand the right way. And there's two things that you mentioned that I think, we can add to our list of things as we're vetting candidates, and that's passion for the business. It's not just about numbers. And I do think, especially when you're working with brands who are getting ready to sell or have sold and getting ready for the next sale. It's very much, unit economics is the foundation, right? You have to have that. And then on top of that, there's a passion play that I think gets missed. And I think some founders, brands think, well, if I have the numbers, everyone will flock to me. And it's like, well, no, I mean, they have to be passionate about what you are building. And then the second thing was around team building. And I don't, that does come up when I'm talking to franchisors around the prospects and who they're looking for, but I don't know that we actually really think and ask candidates How have you built a team? How would you approach building this team? And so I think those are two kind of nuggets to take away as you're thinking about your development process for the brands who do want to be picky on who they're bringing in. We've talked about identifying somebody who's grit, who has faced adversity before. I think building a team is a really good indicator of how they're going to lead their business, and then finding somebody who's passionate about what they're actually doing. I think those are good nuggets.
And
Yeah,
my
those.
question to Sean would be, how do you identify and or align passion and potential,
Wow.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is the $1,000,000 question, right?
All right, pay me, bro. Let's go.
So one of the things that I do as president of TruBlue is before anybody signs and actually meet the team, because I want to protect my team too of their time and so forth, is I do a call with a candidate and I ask them questions, and particularly, making sure that they understand what's required to be successful in this role. It's like setting the expectations of what it takes to be successful. Number two is that they have the same vision and passion and empathy, which is the real key thing, and that they're doing it for the right reasons. And so, because if you are somebody, and everybody's wired differently, and I totally
Mhm.
get it, but this is not if you build it, they will come business. And it is a relationship business. It's you got to be out there in the community, and you have to be proactive, and you have to have energy level, right? And you have to then build your team, because Catherine was saying before is like, it's not just being a great business opportunity and having the right vision as the owner of the business. It only works if the lowest person in the organization understands the vision and understands the mission and what it's all about. And so it's then, can that owner execute and build teams? Because our model is 100% people. It's like our cost of goods sold are our technicians. And so we're only as good as they are. And building a great team is so critical. And our two major levels are not levers, not levels, levers, is really generating revenue or getting the phone to ring, which is going to be networking and so forth. But you also have to have the backfill of the team to be able to keep up with demand. And also, like I mentioned earlier, it's about a relationship. So because it's a relationship, if those customers don't come back, then this business becomes really hard. You got to have that repeat business. You got to have that word of mouth. So all those things are really critical. So it really,
Can I ask you a question,
yeah.
Sean? Like, I love this because Kelly and I have talked about it before, and kudos to you on taking the time as the president to engage with prospects, right? I think that's a beautiful thing. My question to you would be, as a guy who, speaking about you, has scaled brands, right? Like, how does the litmus test of Sean get transferred into when or if Sean isn't, doing that initial call? Like, what is the
Oh yeah, great question. So it comes down to having the vision of what success is, and my team knows that. So very rarely do candidates get all the way to me where it's a complete misfit. And so the way that we tell our story is that it almost becomes a self-selection process for the candidate. And they can see that this is not right for me. So if you come in, and it's real easy to tell people who are very passionate because they talk about how they want to bring this to their community. They talk about, unfortunately, so many of our franchisees who have passion have history and experience of dealing with, their loved ones aging in place, or worse, having falls that led to major injuries or potentially deaths and so forth. So they've been impacted. So you can kind of hear those things. If they're only talking numbers and they're only talking about, what kind of money can I make and what kind of this and that type of stuff, and they don't bring that other side of it, those people tend to not be able to have and build teams that are passionate. It's just, monetarily everything. And then your employees are, this is how much I'll pay you. Right. And then what we teach our owners is that I want them to have their own story and their own passion. One of the things I do first day of training is I ask the franchisees, they introduce themselves and they tell their whys, but then I ask them, is like, where do you see this business in 10 years from now? What does it look like? And then,
He's been listening to our podcast, Catherine.
and I like to hear their stories, because I say, I want to have so many employees. I want to have so many locations. And I said, great. The reason why I asked that question is because I want you to tell that story to people you are recruiting and hiring,
Yeah.
because they need
Yeah.
to feel like they can be a part of it, and
Right.
that vision that you have brings in
Mhm.
good people. So all those things are so critical to bringing in good people, and then them ability to then build great teams, because again, those things are so important. And if you're just chasing the money in this business, because it's not it's gonna be hard, because you gotta be able to see where the need is, and the need is going to be networking, connecting. And a lot of times people who are very analytical, this is when the marketing comes in. When people are very analytical, they want instantaneous data,
Mhm.
and networking and marketing, the traditional referral networking is really difficult
Mhm.
to track, but
Quantify.
more
Yeah.
importantly, it's not instantaneous. And so they
Right.
tend to give up quicker. And whereas
Mhm.
people who see that the vision and understand that it's about awareness, and that you just keep planting seeds, planting seeds, planting seeds, and eventually it all starts to come together, those people tend to do extremely well.
Mhm. Well, Sean, we have peppered you trying to learn what we can about you and the senior industry. I'm going to flip the tables and get to our Dear Franny kind of section of the podcast. And, obviously, James and I jive on our Dear Franny questions all of the time. But with a live guest, we want to hear directly from you on what are you struggling with. And one thing we haven't mentioned is, Sean joined the brand TruBlue when they had just 20 locations. They've now grown to 170 territories. Am I getting that right? And so he has truly been in growth builder, messy middle mode during the time that he's been president at TruBlue. And so, what I want to hear from you today, that maybe James and I can kind of give back some of the knowledge and wisdom that you've just laid on us for the last 15 minutes, is what are you wrestling with? What are some things that every brand in the messy middle wrestles with, and even someone with your vast experience who started your career as a franchisor, that you're still wrestling with today?
I think the one thing that we see, and I've seen this in a lot of brands too, is getting owners to scale the business
Mm,
and look at scaling as an investment. And the challenge that they all have is that some of them, not all, part of it, when you hear like why they're not scaling, is because it costs money. And, or
mhm.
the other one, but which is the bigger issue, which is I think more common, is letting go. And I
Yep.
think
Yeah.
that is the one thing that we see most common, is that, in this business, in order to scale, you've got to invest in people, and that's not an immediate ROI. And so, like going back to earlier, like you talk about people who are very analytical, they want to say, okay, if I invest this, what's my ROI? What's my return? How quickly do I get it? And that makes scaling very challenging, because it's like you have to build your team in order to scale, and that's going to be an investment before that ROI comes in. And so a lot of times people will talk themselves out of scaling, and they'll find justifications to do it, when reality is that if they invest in it and then go for it, they'll grow to a higher level. So we have owners in our system that are doing extremely well, that have scaled to really large teams. But we have a lot of new franchisees in our system, so we have a lot of younger franchisees, and so it's that aspect of, we have the pathway, we are coaching them to it, but then it's that mental block that we struggle with.
It's funny, right? Like, as investment anxiety or hesitation aside, take that out. Take the I don't want to put more capital in, or I don't, right? Or that ROIC analysis. It's a really interesting issue you raise relative to your need for somebody with purpose that is passionate about senior care, right? But also has the potential, like we were talking about, to not micromanage. Because a lot of times when you're scaling, all other factors aside, owner, founder, franchise cap is a real thing, right? And to your point of, you know, helping that person let it go, that is like, teaching, me a language that I've never heard before, right? And trying to comply with that. So, that sort of here to here move, especially at, a business that is supposed to be driven by the owner, founder, franchisee, and then built upon, that's a massive transition. Is that something that you as a franchisor feel obligated to coach? Or is that something you as a franchisor go, hey, if you want to get to this potential, you're gonna have to learn that lesson or just be happy at where you're at. How do
Well,
you ma
James, well, I'll add to that because I've worked for a couple of brands where obviously same store sales is gold, and we all need to grow, and we all need to be better than we were last year. And in franchising, that means that we're driving more dollars right to our franchisees, and we're growing our unit count. And so for brands that are in the territory based space, that means that you have to get them to grow into more territory. And I think that's the roadblock that Sean is butting up against. And to piggyback on what James's question is, I've always thought about, we ask a lot of our franchise business coaches, right? So they are our front lines. They're our liaison between the franchisor and the franchisee. A lot of often teaching franchisees how to read a P&L, what a P&L is, how to book their expenses and line items. And so there's some business basics we have to teach our franchisees, but there's a level of business, to James's point, coaching how to be a leader that I haven't seen brands really embrace, around adding that as a layer of support. And to James's point, I mean, that's exactly what you're asking for, Sean, right? Is like, okay, well, how do I coach this individual to see the potential? And that is a mindset shift, that is psychological,
Mhm.
beyond investment. And it's not a layer of support that I often see in franchising. And so I think that's to James's question around, is that the layer that you're thinking about at TruBlue? Is okay, this is the roadblock I'm coming up against of why these people won't grow. Now, how do I add, a resource that then helps them to get out of their own way?
caveated with growth that is not due to the fact that you aren't making money, right? Like, I'm
Right.
comfortable
Right.
here, well, but
See,
how
and
do you
that's
li
well, and I have a story on that because for me, the growth often is like, well, everything I have is fine, right? So I have an example. I was at a food brand and we were raising prices, and we could not get this one franchisee to raise prices, and he was at the bottom. And it worked for a while. Like he didn't pay rent, right? Because he owned his business. He didn't have any debt on the business. And so he's like, no, I'm making whatever, the $100,000 I want to make every year off of this business. And so he was like, "No, I'm fine. I'm not going to raise prices." And it wasn't until someone else came in his market and pushed the limit and said, "I'm not going to be at this price. I'm going to be higher, and you're going to meet me there," right? That needle moved. And so it was the peer pressure. And Sean, you mentioned, look, we have examples of people who are killing it, and are killing it with their hands kind of off the business, not necessarily not running it, but letting other people do the day-to-day that needs to happen. And so it doesn't seem like maybe that peer pressure is working in the same way that I've seen it work in other brands. But to James's point, I do see that as another roadblock of like, no, I'm comfortable. Like, you need me to grow because you need me to grow, not because I want to grow.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
what's your thoughts, bro, on how you handle that?
yeah, no, it's like you guys identified some really key components. One of the things I learned is that complacency and being comfortable is the biggest challenge, because what happens
Mhm.
is you launch the business, right, and you're just like, you invest into it, you're not making money right away, and all of a sudden you start doing pretty well, you start to break even, you start making some money, you start getting comfortable, and then all of a sudden you say, okay, now let's start hiring, and they think, wait a minute, I'm breathing and I'm feeling good, and now I got to scale, because in our model, particularly, if we know what your cap is, like if you are an owner operator and you're not scaling your business, we know that like how many technicians that you can manage. And so we know the number. And so then it's like, okay, how do we get them to start building teams and so forth? So we started focusing on that a lot the last couple of years. And one of those things is like we have a roadmap to revenue roadmap. So it's like, hey, when you're here, in order to get to the next level, you got to be, have this type of people, this many technicians. So we have a very clear roadmap all the way up to where our top tiers are. The other thing too that we've done, which I'm really excited about, is we actually brought in a scaling specialist. We had somebody who actually ran a home service business for many years,
Nice
scaled it,
job.
and so
Yeah,
now he is our scaling coach. But the
love it.
cool thing about it is like he doesn't coach everybody. And so what we do is we identify people that are at that point, but then have the mindset to be able to make change. Because the last thing we want to do is have a coach go in and say, "Hey, here's the things you need to do," and they're like, "Oh, yeah, I don't want to do it." Well, then there's no point. So, it's getting them to understand is like, "Hey, you can get to this level, this next level. And we got a coach here who's going to help you do that. And the other thing too is I think it's really cool that we've done recently. We're very fortunate, and a lot of franchisees do this too. But our onboarding coach was a former franchisee who started from scratch, grew it, got successful, sold that business, and now he's our onboarding coach. And so,
Smart move. Good job, bro.
yeah, so I think we've got some real credibility from our coaching perspective, and we really spend a lot of time on the KPIs, and
Yeah.
not only the KPIs and where that, but so many people look at the KPIs and say, "Oh, you're low here," but it's like, okay, what are the actions that I need to do to make
Right.
improvements there, and that we have those actions, and so it's very prescriptive in what they need to do to make it to get to the next level.
Are all those tools as a result of the turnaround from 20 through growth that you learned the lessons, or is it, by assimilation? Like what as a prospective franchisee, legitimately, not disclosed. But like, I love your owner operator to owner path, right? I love these are all sales things for me, right? I love your revenue roadmap. I love your scaling coach if I'm scalable in mindset. But are all those KPI identifiers, which we talk about, need to exist in a system, but the really good systems have the needles you can pull or push or levers you can activate to hit those KPIs
Yep.
in building those, to Catherine's point, light items, if you will, was that off of like, man, I got here and, learned the hard lessons. And so, or are those just brought in from industry? Like, how'd you put those together? Is what I'm saying.
Oh, it's like, James, you give me a lot of credit saying I'm really smart, but I'm not really that smart. I look at wins, right? And it's like, what are owners doing that has made them successful? And then we just take those lessons learned and best practices and we implement it into the system. And so that's really what those KPIs come from. And a lot of those KPIs are really kind of business 101, right? It's like, marketing, that KPI is going to be, your leads, how many leads you're getting. And then the next one is going to be conversion. Like how many of those leads converted to an estimate, how many estimate converted to a sale and so forth. And then another KPI is going to be reviews, because reviews is a huge thing when it comes to not only credibility, but also SEO and everything else. So all those have different levers, and that a lot of times small business owners, if they're only focused on top line and bottom line, they think, okay, make more money, I need to get more leads. And if you can look at your conversion rates and you identify like, hey, as a system, you're way below, there's an opportunity to improve. And a lot of times business owners don't realize that because they think, oh, I'm answering the phones, but it's like, okay, well, there's something not connecting, and it's who's answering the phones. What are they saying? And then areas of improvement. So that's what we kind of focus on when I talk about those levers, is like, I think we've identified, solutions for it, and we coach to it. And so that's, I think, is really key to help people grow.
Well,
What,
Sean,
what,
go
good
ahead.
job, by the way. Sorry.
I think the two things that you mentioned would be two things that would be my suggestions, right? Hiring somebody that is specific on getting business owners out of their own way. And you've done that through the scaling coach, and then implementing that roadmap to say, okay, this is what it could look like. The one thing I would challenge you on, though, is that you mentioned your roadmap was kind of revenue and people based. But we talked earlier about the brand being a passion play and people wanting to impact the people that and have had, a lot of your franchisees having had bad experiences as they are helping their parents age. And so one thing you could think about is, how do you incorporate that passion play into the roadmap? So how many more people can you help if you expand? And showing, the gap in, hey, and we'll use, James and I's hometown, James and I will take South Louisiana, but let's show the gap of North Louisiana. Nobody exists like TruBlue. And so if you don't do it, these seniors are going to go without, right? And so kind of dialing into that passion play.
Wow, Catherine, it's like, I feel like you just had like a microphone on my call previous. I literally before this had a call with our marketing director, and I almost said the exact same things. It's like, one of the things that we need to tell our owners is that let's say, so non-marketing people would look like a post, right? I could do a post on Facebook about helping someone age in place, and they're like, well, the phone didn't ring, so it was a waste, right? But my point is that every post you make is awareness, and every awareness that you make could impact the lives of a senior. And it could be just make their lives better or even save lives. So every little touch point and every little awareness point is huge, and it can pay off dividends. And so that's what we're kind of like really shifting our marketing to the point of like, it's large companies look at social media as impressions. And so they understand that impressions leads to awareness, and awareness leads to sales and so forth. If you do the traditional, I did this, what's my ROI, then no one would ever do social media because there's no one-to-one necessarily immediate reaction unless you go viral and stuff like that. But unpaid, it doesn't happen. So it is all about awareness, about impressions, and understanding that every little post we make, every blog that we write, every event that we attend, and every person that we can educate can impact the lives of seniors that so much deserve it and need it. And by the way, I don't need to tell you guys all this or our audience that we're living longer, which is great. This demographic is only going to grow. And we're running out of assisted living facilities. We're running out of places for these people. They're going to be forced to age in place.
Yeah.
And
And we as a society do a terrible job of it
we
here
have,
in the
as a
Western
society,
culture,
we
right? Like
need
we're
to do
horrible at
better.
it. We're horrible. Like we're horrible at it, and that's a whole bit different conversation.
Yep.
And I'd love to have that, right? And insert the whole baby boomer generation issues. Like there's a whole conversation that I think our generation needs to have about it. And that's not for Catherine's podcast, but I want to have it, right? So let's do it on the side. But what's interesting, and I think Catherine raised a really good point. Uh, and then from a marketing perspective, you nailed it. From a non-marketing executive, marketing just drowns me out at times. But what's interesting about what you're saying is that is the KPI, right? The KPI from a passion standpoint is, to use a, social media term, impressions. It's really about sharing, right? And so I think if I'm TruBlue and I'm a TruBlue owner, one of my empath sort of action items has to be a willingness to share freely of things that may land in somebody's Facebook feed, the Facebook feed. And in that, the Facebook feed, maybe that person in North Louisiana isn't a customer, right? But they're like, holy shit, sorry, TruBlue just put out, James and Catherine, who are the greatest TruBlue franchisees, put out something about, how to vet a blah, blah, blah in your blah, blah, blah. And that helped me. And so I think, helping and sharing from an empathy standpoint, to your point, needs to be a KPI, right? So are we as a brand pushing we are going to give this, we're not necessarily doing anything anybody can't do per se. We're just doing it better, and in a mechanism that is proven. But like, let's just share our stuff, man. It's sort of like making your algorithm free, and that to me, I think, is a genius marketing move.
Yeah. One of the things that we've noticed too is like, so networking is so key.
Yeah, bro.
And what we realized is that as a small business owner, you launch a business, you get busy. And all of a sudden we'd have conversations with owners like, tell us about your networking, because we have minimum standards that you got to be out so many hours a week. And what was happening is like this squeaky wheel gets the grease. So the non-revenue generating activities were being done, and then the networking wasn't. So we implemented a requirement after 6 months that you have to have a dedicated, we call it BDR, which is business development rep, and you're required to have one. And so it can be you as an owner. I'd rather it be you, but you guys spend X amount of hours dedicated to it. And if you can't or don't feel comfortable, because some people don't feel comfortable doing that, then you get to hire someone, and it's part-time, but they spend so many hours a week, because without that, this networking, if you're not networking, you're not visible. If you're not visible, you're not getting to the senior community. And if you're not getting to the senior community, you're just a handyman business. And we're far more than that. And so that was one of the things that we implemented recently, because we just knew that it needed to be done. And it kind of comes back to the scaling challenge, is that, they want to do it, but then they're like, how do I afford it? Right. And it's like, you
And
can't
not afford it. Yeah.
right.
It's so funny. The BDR thing is brilliant, right? And look, I think translating this into from a non-service standpoint to a F&B standpoint, right? Or just any franchise in general, LSM, unless you're a full out brand, and there are a few of them in certain spaces, right? So like Ace is a brand, right? Chick-fil-A is a brand, right? But when you get really down to it, absent those groups that are either already brand oriented, McDonald's is a brand, right? Or those brands that are pushing, or those concepts that are pushing to that brand awareness level, right? The rest of us are small businesses,
Uh-huh.
and you have to treat LSM as networking, right? That's what it is. And I think the true challenge is, how do you motivate general managers on a scale on a system basis? How do you motivate small business franchisees to go, hey, look, I'm not buying this and going to sit idly by and watch the money come in. I'm buying this because this is a mechanism for me to go out and make money. Right. And I think that's where, you keep using networking. It's so funny from a private practice lawyer back in the day, the way you drove your business was networking. Right.
Mhm.
And then all of a sudden you move into F&B and the word networking, I've never heard networking used at any brand I've ever worked for or with. And I think that needs to
Well, we call
start.
it LSM though. I mean,
I know, but I think it
call it
needs to
something
start
different.
being networking, right?
Mm,
Like it
yeah.
needs to be, people don't come to your business initially because of the business. They come to the business maybe for the first time, but they come to the business because of the owner, right? And so I think I as a person who has a love-hate relationship with marketing, and Catherine knows this, networking is really the new buzzword that I'm calling out thanks to Sean Fitzgerald in the LSM world.
Well,
So
Well,
take
I
it
would
away.
argue that it is not new. It has been screamed
Nobody
from the
said it.
rooftops of
Nobody. It
every
LeBlanc,
marketing. Nope,
run it back. We're
nope,
about to have our first marital argument with Sean. In front of Sean,
uh-uh.
run our nobody has said, not you, not me, not anybody. I have never heard the word networking from a marketing person in 16 years. Oh my God, in these
No,
in
okay. Well, but do you know why? Because people are scared of networking. Because people, when you say networking to someone who's not used to network, and same is true for marketing, right? And that's why we barely.
you say
I would say
LSM so you can charge me more. That's why
no.
you
I say
say it.
awesome. And honestly, what I say is you're shaking hands and kissing babies, right? So
That's
I'm more
networking.
related. I know it is. That's my point. Is that
Well, we didn't say it. Now we're using the word networking. I'm making a sign. Sean,
fine,
I'm infamous. I've gone
fine.
viral with 9 followers by making a sign that I couldn't get to show on our podcast because I had to blur off. But I think it's available on a link that
It is.
Catherine
It's
was
available
kind enough.
on LinkedIn, our
And
favorite
it's
social network.
unbelievably technical, but I'm going with network. Okay.
Networking.
That's what we're
Well,
doing
and look,
today,
I think
buddy.
that you're
Sean.
absolutely right, it I do see the pendulum swinging back to an acceptance that marketing has to happen outside of the computer, where, for the last, I would say, for some brands, it's been the last 10 years, for F&B brands, it's been the last 6 years, but we've been computer marketing, and it doesn't work, and it has lost efficiencies, and we want it to work because all we have to do is sit behind the computer, but it doesn't work. And
I
that's
couldn't.
where you're seeing a resurgence in marketers and professionals telling you to get out and hit the pavement because people buy from people. And I think Sean, to your point, what's unique is that with TruBlue, you're starting from the very beginning of that franchisee journey, saying you can't do regular marketing. It's not going to work. You can spend all you want on Google ads, but unless you're in front of the person talking to them about what you are offering, it's not going to work. And and I've worked for the brands that are like, no, we just need to fix our meta. And it's like, no, that's not what's going to work.
But
Catherine,
but
can I jump?
clearly, right? It really, yeah, you can. It's all you. Talk about this later, though. Is it your market? Meaning the 55 and above, like, we and they did not come on when phones and computers were there. So anyway, keep going, Sean. Sorry to
No,
interrupt you.
Catherine, I think you raised something. I've said this before. As I think that as a digital marketer, because I was a marketing person, but I worked for a digital marketing agency. I think digital marketing has made people bad at marketing.
Lazy.
Lazy is probably the best word because they felt like you're saying is like, I don't need a network. I can just post something on my Facebook page. But that has just completely made people not networking and going out and connecting, and they want instantaneous results. It's like, okay, so no one follows me, so now I'm going to do paid Facebook to get out to people to it's like, not saying it doesn't work. All of these things, marketing
No,
is
they
a
all work
holistic
together.
approach,
Yeah.
right? I always say
No, they
marketing is
don't.
everything. Everything is marketing. So
Yeah.
there is no silver bullets, but the fact that I think people are looking for instantaneous results is because Meta and Google can give you instantaneous results from performance standpoint, and they want everything to be like that. And then all of a sudden, that's why you're starting to hear people saying PPC is not working for me anymore. Paid's not working for me anymore, is because it's oversaturated
Yep.
and people want relationships. And if you're a business that's built on trust, it's a people business and you got to connect with people and you got to be out there.
And
Nailed it.
what business is not built on trust? I've
Yes.
gotta trust that you're not poisoning me at the food place. I've gotta trust that, you're not, gonna give me a bad haircut, when I go to the haircut place. Every business is built on trust. And look, I think that trust is a buzzy word in franchising because the other thing that has happened and maybe it's correlated to the demise of the results of digital media, but the trust between franchisee and franchisor, I think, is at a very pitiful place across the board. And so when we talk about trust, we have to build trust with our customers and we have to build trust with our franchisees. And that's just a statement.
Can I give one piece of advice for people who are afraid to network? Because this is what I tell our
Mhm.
franchisees is that networking is not selling what you do. Networking is just telling your story. That's it. Just go out and tell your story, your whys, what you're doing, and don't try to sell anybody anything. And if you do that, number one, the anxiety goes down because nobody, like, if you're
Yeah.
not a salesperson, you feel very uncomfortable selling
Yeah.
and no one wants to be sold anything. So it's just like, don't sell. Just go out and,
Well, and Sean, you nailed it, right? Like I'd make it even easier for somebody and it's advice I've given that I've learned. It's just about connecting.
mhm,
Right? Like I'm gonna I wanna learn about you, and then hopefully you wanna learn about me, right?
mhm.
And so that at the end of the day, I think y'all nailed it. Like you guys started this problem back in the day with like pay per clicks and all that kind of stuff, and you all made bajillions of dollars, and y'all were all the cool people in the business that everybody wanted to talk to. And the algorithm gets jacked, and there's certain billionaires that just
Mhm,
control it, and it doesn't really help small businesses. And what's
mhm.
happened is now the internet has taken hostage small business thinking that's the solution. And I haven't met a small business that does $100 per whatever thing and moves a needle. It just wastes your money. So at the end of the day, from a franchise or perspective, a franchise sales perspective, a franchisee selling their business perspective, until you get to that recognizable brand powerhouse, you got to go out and connect, and it's not happening on a computer. And the same thing exists, put my hat on for operators. Too many computers in operations.
Mm,
Anyway,
yeah.
Yeah. And
Well,
good stuff today. We need 4 hours. I
we
love
do,
this.
we do.
More Sean
It has been good
Fitzgerald.
stuff today. Well, and on that note, let's get to our 3 takeaways that we've had today, and I'll kick us off, while Sean and James think about the 3 nuggets
I've got mine.
we think people should listen to. All right. So first is adding that team building into your fran dev process. I think that's a great gate metric to think about as you're adding franchise prospects. Two is what TruBlue has done in adding a scaling coach. I think we ask too much of our FBCs to be like the all in one. And so adding some expertise to that layer, I think is really smart. And then three, as you've heard us discuss for the last 10 minutes very passionately, LSM still works. So you should do it. James.
Okay, we'll let our guest go last. Here's the things I'd learn, right? One, let's start from like LSM doesn't work at all unless you network, and marketers don't talk about networking enough. And Sean brought back networking into franchising. He did it. He's the creator of that, father of networking and franchising. And now I'm replacing all us LSM conversations with networking for any business I talk to. Thank you, Sean. Secondly, the owner operator to owner transition is brilliant. I love that. That's fantastic. And that gets overlooked or presumed by franchisors. So kudos to TruBlue and Sean. And then the third thing was the empathy ethos approach to connecting with prospects prior to, moving on in the process. Query whether how do you replicate Sean Fitzgerald? I don't know, but I love that litmus test of gut check of the why. So good job to you, and score one for networking all day. This is also available for purchase on our
We'll
website.
make t-shirts. Take a
Let's go.
picture. I'll make a t-shirt.
Let's do it.
John, what are your big 3 takeaways today?
I think really it's just, just reinforcing some of the things that we're doing is key. That's one thing that's nice to hear from outsiders, that these challenges that we're facing and some of the solutions that we're doing is something that you would recommend. So, having the coach, but really, I think it really comes down to the two is that you've highlighted and asked is like, how do we bring that passion all the way down to all the employees, and what tools are we providing, right? It's one thing to talk about it, but what are the tools that we're providing to constantly reinforce that everybody understands that the passion for this business and helping people is really key, and how to and what makes TruBlue different, and how do we do that. And lastly, it's just continuing. I'm going to go with James with networking. Is that you know it's a key for our business, and I don't know what business it's not key for, and any business I've been associated with. And so it's just you know, and networking is, like I said. Here's one thing, another nugget I use in training from our franchisees. If you go out and network and you do the worst presentation, conversation, I don't care what it is, it's better than not doing anything. And so even if you don't feel comfortable at it and you're not good at it, that's okay. Just the more you do it, the better you get at it. But even just a bad presentation is better than one you didn't do.
I would encourage you on this. I love what you started to continue the share, right? Continue the share. Like if I'm your COO, highly compensated with a plunge pool and a sauna, like I am going to push our people to continue the share, right? Like social, like that needs to become the ethos of TruBlue. If I'm sharing myself, be a connection, I'm sharing my stuff on social. So hopefully it lands on helping somebody. Good job, Sean Fitzgerald. Nice guess, Catherine.
Yes, and
Thank you.
thank you so much for joining us, Sean. That concludes our episode today for Dear Frannie. If this felt familiar, you are not late. You are right on time. Thank you again, Sean, for joining us, and we'll see you later.
Thank you.